Imagine your association members or professional society members learning CME credit CEHs on Instagram. They're fully accredited, just short form videos in their social feed, and they count, brought to you by your organization. The Medical Learning Institute figured out what most training teams haven't, that learners aren't lazy, just the traditional format, it's kind of broken. Their learners are physicians, and they're very busy doing important things. They're already scrolling though. So instead of building this portal and driving traffic to that, MLI went to them. They have peer-led videos, microlearning content natively on social, and it's working. And it's giving them credit. Ted Seiler is their director of marketing, and he's been a huge asset in this model for them. In this episode, he breaks down exactly how they built it, what it took to get right, and why this approach is about to change continuing education for good. Now let's get into it. Hey everybody, Erick Prospero. Today we're here with Ted Seiler, and we're going to be discussing social first medical education. Now, Ted Seiler is the director of marketing at the Medical Learning Institute, where he oversees marketing communications with expertise in digital innovation, UI, UX, brand development, and content strategy. He is dedicated to expanding the reach of MLI's CME programs, connecting with new audiences, and driving measurable organizational growth. Now, I'm very excited about this topic because it's an entirely different perspective on how CME education is typically done. Before we jump into the content, Ted, could you tell us a little more about yourself?
Yeah, thanks for the intro. Great to be here. Yeah, I'm a marketing director for a medical education company. We're a nonprofit, we're jointly accredited with commendation. So everything we do is really about empowering the physicians and other healthcare providers that really are out there treating the patients. And really the end goal here for us is really to make an improvement in patient care and outcomes.
Now, before we jump into this different approach, can you tell me why it matters, right? Why you guys are doing things, and why are you guys flipping the script on this?
I think it's really about meeting physicians where they're at. I think physicians are being asked to do a lot in their day, and I think it's challenging to find time to find the required education to advance their practice. At the end of the day, too, physicians are consumers. They're on these social platforms where they're consuming content all the time. So why not meet them where they're at here? And instead of just seeing your everyday influencer, why not put content in front of them that they can actually use and put into practice? So we decided to kind of break the mold here and shake it up from the traditional webinar format, which we still obviously use and leverage to our advantage. But this format really has given us the opportunity to bring different topics to people and meet them in a place where they don't traditionally get this type of content and education, and do it in a way where there's a lot more validity behind the content with the accreditation behind it.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. It's a lot more accessible. They're probably going to be already on these platforms, and it just feels more natural. Now, what are some of the changes in behavior that you're seeing that drives this, right?
Like I was saying, I mean, physicians are really pinched, they're squeezed. There's a lot asked of them in their day, and they're increasingly, they need to find time to still meet these requirements. So at the end of the day, they're finding a few minutes in between patients or in between cases, and it's a lot easier to read like a white paper or a quick article. And in this case, we developed Real CE, which is, it's something that's very short, it's very digestible. Videos that are 1 minute to 2 minutes long that they can watch and really consume in bite-sized chunks, and still be able to put the whole piece together and understand what they can do to make an impact and make a change in the practice.
That makes perfect sense. Now, of course, we're big proponents of bite-sized microlearning content. I mean, it's our bread and butter. This entire channel is founded on it, right? But why do you think this matters more to physicians? Right, considering that they're busy professionals, they have a lot going on, and the reality is, in the education space, we tend to think our content is the most important thing, right? But I would assume these guys are pretty busy.
They're very busy. Like I said, it's challenging to be a physician or to be a nurse or to be any type of healthcare provider these days. And I think, there are these heavy requirements on them to maintain their licenses. They need to earn the CME. So finding a way to consume content that's not so taxing. Traditional methods might be conferences, which you have to travel to. There might be heavy costs to attend. Or other times you're just sitting down and watching a really long webinar with long modules, and carving out time in your schedule for that can be really tough when you're also balancing your day-to-day life and your profession and your responsibilities. So these traditional CME methods, I think, are great, and they've worked for a really long time. But I think this micro content format really, it makes it digestible. It fits into their schedules, and it's much easier to consume. And also it's more shareable. It kind of fits today's culture and the way the content is consumed. It's much easier to share something that you find on social media compared to like a traditional piece of content that you might view via webinar, or you have a printed piece that lands in your hands. It's much easier to get that into the hands of your colleagues or anybody else that you might work with that could benefit from it.
That makes perfect sense. And I'm going to work with the team on the back end to make sure we have some footage and some clips to show. But can you describe the user
Sure.
experience of your guys' platform and why it's different and what you're trying to do with it?
Sure. I mean, really, it's first and foremost, it's social first. So, I mean, traditionally, you would have to be logging into an LMS or a video platform of some kind to consume CME content. But in reality, we're ungating this content on social media platforms, and we're doing it in a platform agnostic way. We're sharing it across all of our social accounts. We're trying to get this out and create as much awareness around this as much as possible. So in terms of the user experience, somebody might be scrolling through their feed and all of a sudden they're going to hit one of our Real CE videos, which typically is another physician speaking to them about a disease state. In certain instances, we've presented on severe asthma or EOE as of recently. We've had other activities on hematology and oncology, but they're coming to them with ways that these different disease states might present. They're coming to them with solutions for how to address a patient or how to diagnose something. And it's happening right in front of them in their social feed. So, we're really trying to stop that scroll. I think as a marketer, we're always trying to really leverage these platforms, and a lot of times people are very distractible. So how do we get them to stop and consume it? So we're bringing them something different, and we're bringing it to them from somebody that has some credibility. A peer should be speaking to them, telling them about this, and knowing that MLI is behind this, it's accredited, and they can actually earn credit for it. So it's a little bit different in terms of how the user might come across it, but there's still a lot of the same mechanisms behind it in terms of how a learner would then consume the content, and if they wanted to take the next step, still earn CME, where they would have to go to our LMS to do the evaluations and the assessments in order to earn credit and issue a CME certificate.
Which I love the approach. I mean, that solves such a big problem, right? Not everyone's going to be excited to log on to an LMS, let alone download an app, right? I know when I started in this space, we had this big assumption, and there was a big push for customized apps. But who does that, right? Who's actively going to be downloading an app and trying
one more app on your device
that you're not going to use? I mean, maybe it has some practicality, but I love the approach of meeting learners where they're at and offering CEHs, especially once they go through the content. Now, why do you think traditional methods aren't working, right? What are some of the challenges you see with the traditional approach of having an LMS or going through that process?
I mean, I think kind of what I spoke to earlier, it's the amount of time and the requirement that you have to put through it. I think there's a certain level of familiarity, especially as you're discovering content from different providers. You're not always apt to sign up for another site and give your information to somebody else. So I think consumer behavior is evolving, and I think people are more protective of their information. And I think, these platforms are much more familiar to folks. So meeting them there and delivering the content through these platforms that they're already consuming time on or spending time on consuming content, why not deliver some content to them that has more value, that's going to help them kind of break that skepticism and allow them to take the next step and potentially earn credit for what they're watching on their social feed. It's kind of it's a new dynamic compared to the traditional methods, and I think it's something that we've gotten a lot of really positive response to.
Yeah, for me, it just makes perfect sense. I mean, you're going to get more exposure. It doubles as a marketing asset, right? I know there's a lot of time when it comes to creating online education, especially for associations or professional society learners. I mean, there's a ton of investment that goes into actually building the content, but when it comes to distribution, the strategy falls flat, right? Or there's no collaboration with marketing, and you have these assets that drive meaning and value in the industry and aren't necessarily available for their end learners. But
right. I will say though, it is a challenge because there's still the component of meeting accreditation requirements, which are very strict for a reason, right? We don't want to have outside bias creep into this content and education and influence it in any way. And being on these platforms is kind of an area where it's not really outlined. It's one of those things where we're kind of operating in this gray area while still trying to respect the accreditation requirements. We still meet all of them, but we still have our LMS really to lean into that. Our LMS is still really that mechanism and that centralization of where our content lives and is housed, but it's how we're ungating it on these platforms and how we're reaching people to create the awareness, I think is really the linchpin here in terms of what really differentiates it from traditional methods.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, at the very least, you have that top of the funnel exposure, and then if they want to lean into it, get some of the other benefits, that they can log into the platform. But at that point, when your brand has exposure, they're at least engaged and they started the content. Now,
yeah, the engagement's huge.
What does it actually mean to design your content for social environments rather than just an LMS environment?
Sure. Well, I think it's kind of similar to what we do from a marketing standpoint, where you really have to go mobile first, but in this case, it's social first. So there's all the same elements that you typically have to consider when developing a webinar or producing content in general, but you then have to rethink of, all right, well, we're going from this landscape PowerPoint format with a talking head in the corner to now working within a portrait style mobile first. You know, how do you make that content work? You know, it's a talking head. If you need cutaway graphics or charts, how are you handling that? So that's a major challenge. That's something you have to rethink. Publishing and ungating, kind of what you spoke to before. How do you ungate this content? Working with content creators and how they're not only producing the content, are they recording and producing on their own? Are we recording and producing it? Managing that dynamic is definitely different. And it's one of those things where there's just a level of control that you have to be willing to, I think, kind of give up when you start to kind of go down this path and you lean into these platforms. There's so many components and elements of these platforms that you don't have control over, but there are constraints that you have to work within. So, you know, trying to find a happy medium that you can find a format and produce it in a way that's going to work across all these platforms and reach a larger audience compared to, you know, if it was just housed on a single platform on your LMS where somebody had to log in. So there's a lot of different elements. I think faculty sourcing and influencers, I think they really are the key differentiator here. I think traditionally where you're looking for KOLs or subject matter experts, I think it's great to find somebody that has deep expertise and is well known in the area, but screen presence really matters here. I think, you know, having somebody with a slow, monotone voice talking over a slide deck is one thing, but, you know, to be engaging on the social media platform, you have to have a certain screen presence and delivery. You have to have a certain style that's going to resonate with your peers, with other healthcare physicians, with other patients, you know. So I think there's a lot more to it. And I think it seems simple at the surface, but I think when you really look at it and evaluate it, there's a lot more granularity, a lot more detail you have to think through to produce a piece of content like this or a series of content like this.
The funny thing too is you could even say there's even less production value added to this. I know it requires a little more creativity and structure, but when it comes to social first content, you don't necessarily need the fanciest of studios, right? You're right.
Correct.
If you have a dynamic
you don't always
speaker,
need the polish.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you don't always need the polish.
And we're a polished company, right? I mean, so what I love about this is that some of the best performing pieces of content are from your direct peers, right? Are from these micro influencers that can speak to the topic eloquently. Now, the other thing I love about this too, it's just modern, right? I think a lot of these professional societies in the past, back in the day, they had this prominence, and there was an expectation of the industry going to them. Right now, things are changing. Right, we have to meet learners with where they're at. There's a ton of competition in the space, and it's just easy. So this is very refreshing. I'm a big fan of what you guys are doing. I know we started talking about this briefly, but why do peer voices and micro influencers resonate so strongly with clinicians? Right, like what's the big difference here?
Yeah, we actually had another event recently, and we brought a couple creators in to speak to this. And I think one of the things that really rung true is authenticity really leads to trust. I think when these peers can come and bring their authentic experience and their authentic opinions and present it in a way that really impacts the way that they show up and they care for patients and that they do their jobs, I think it creates more trust. So I think there's something to that too when you're working with creators. It's not always about the following. I do think it's about that screen presence. I do think it's about that authenticity. I think content is king, and I think there's a certain sniff test that I think that users can typically kind of figure out quickly, whether it's the level of polish, whether it's that presence. But I think authenticity really rings true, and I think it shines when you find the right people.
That makes perfect sense. So we, Ninjatropic, again, we specialize in microlearning, content production, etc. You can find your stuff, but we own a small portion of a patient education company. And one of the things that we realized was doctors hate being sold to, right? If they are incredibly defensive. So if you're presenting content and you're not a peer, they're immediately gonna have, they're naturally defensive, right? They have to protect their time. So it makes complete sense that if it's another well-known peer within the industry, one, there's a competitive aspect, so they always like to learn from each other, but the fact that you're hearing from somebody that walks the walk, that's actually doing what you do, it just brings a ton of credibility.
Yeah, I think that credibility goes a long way. I think to your point, they're being sold to constantly by these pharmaceutical companies. They have reps in their ears, they have different people telling them what they should or shouldn't do. But at the end of the day, with somebody that can walk the walk and talk the talk, that has gone through it and has been in their shoes, I think goes a long way, especially when they're presenting a solution or a new perspective that's going to change the way that you approach patient care or treatments that could really impact the outcome.
Now, with these peers on these videos, I know watching a short video is one thing, right? But CME still requires structured learning and credit. So how do you bridge the gap between social engagement versus CME participation? What does that process actually look like?
It's a great question. So I kind of spoke to that earlier. We still need to leverage our LMS. That's still the mechanism that needs to happen in order to provide that CME component. But the way we do that and the way we bridge that gap is really by priming the learner up front. So we make it very clear up front that this has CME attached to it. If they want to earn CME, they're gonna have to watch to the end to understand what to do to take the next step and learn more. So throughout that, so we prime the user right at the very beginning there, and then at the end we use a really strong call to action. Each at the end of our videos usually have 5 to 10 seconds where that actual speaker is then trying to direct them. There's a voiceover, there's usually a graphic on screen telling them to go to realce.com. So we try to use a really short, easy to remember URL as part of our call to action. That URL will typically point those learners to a series page where those people can pick and choose the different videos that they'd like to participate in. Not all platforms allow links and clickability, so you kind of have to factor that into things. Some platforms do, some platforms don't. So kind of to take that platform agnostic approach is really why we leaned into the call to action as that strong driver to make sure that in the beginning and at the end, the user is aware that there's something that they need to do to take the next step.
Love it. No, that makes perfect sense, just so they're aware, and there might be a little more incentive to drive and lean into the content, which I'm sure that your metrics on these social media platforms are great. Which, to that point, I know that there's a series of metrics that are going to be on the social media platform, which, again, as a marketer myself, you want to see high engagement, right? You want to see people watching a video past that initial 13 seconds. Now, what does measurement look like when the education starts on the social platform versus what are you guys tracking at the end on your LMS platform?
So our LMS and our CME initiatives all typically come with certain levels of outcomes that we need to provide. There's different evaluations and assessments that we need to provide to the learner in order to measure knowledge gain and then in order to be able to issue that certificate. So that's still there. But what you add with the social media first campaigns with this content is you're layering all these different signals into the mix here that goes above and beyond the traditional outcomes. So you kind of already mentioned a view, which is great. We have views and impressions. We can kind of track the overall distribution of our organic content, the influencer's organic content, and just look at that or that reach. But then to go beyond that, you start to look at the qualitative data, not just the quantitative, not just the counts of likes or views. So the engagements are great. Engagements, like shares, comments, saves, those are all things that we were able to track and also provide to our providers as outcomes to really tell that story. But what I think actually really tells a story, and it's really interesting, is that qualitative comment data. Seeing what people are commenting, and I think it's the internet, so you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt. You're going to get some stuff that comes out of left field or that might be a bit trollish. But at the other end of it, you're getting people that are really authentic, that are seeing this content and resonating with it. A lot of time you're getting patients that are commenting on this saying, I have this disease, or I feel for this person because I've been in that boat. So you're seeing patients comment, you're seeing other providers comment, you're saying like this, how great this format is, just to hype each other up, to see them kind of in this position to create awareness around these things and also teach others how they can improve care and create awareness. And at the end of the day, again, it's about improving patient outcomes. So there's a lot of positivity, and I think that qualitative data tells a different story as part compared to what we traditionally do in terms of outcomes. Like, there's only a certain percent of people enrolled and knowledge gain was this percentage. I think this engagement data tells a story about how well received it is and what the general sentiment is around this topic or around these challenges. So I think there's just another layer of data that really helps with the storytelling. And I think, good marketers, I think good educators, you can leverage that data in your favor to really understand where the gaps are and where the needs need to be met.
For sure. And then there's the social learning aspect of it too. And one of the things I'm excited about, I mean, you can easily link this to some form of a Facebook group or a community as well, which, again, there's a lot of platforms that advertise they're essentially trying to create a social network on their LMS, but I've never been a fan of that because nobody's going to log into your platform to talk to Susie from this other department. But if you can meet them where they're at, Facebook groups are very active, right, compared to LinkedIn and on-platform groups. So I love the aspect. Are there any other integrations or features tied to social learning or anything tied to community-based learning practices?
Well, I think in this case, we don't have any type of like guidelines or communities created around this. I do think it would be probably the next step or evolution. I think there's other platforms like Reddit where you see people commenting and there's like a thread level of engagement. I think that's what we're trying to almost create, that engagement within the post, within each thread. I think the group is the next step beyond that, where it creates more freedom for the group to post, engage with each other, and kind of to initiate those conversations versus us kind of speaking out to the world. I think it really is kind of more of a communal conversation when you kind of go to that group level.
Yeah, for sure. And what I love about this too is it just puts the organization at the center of conversation, right? Where it's actually happening. So with that being said, what does the next 5 years look like for you guys? Do you think short form and social integrated CME becomes more mainstream? I personally hope it does. I love the approach that you guys are doing, but yeah, what does the future look like for you guys?
I think we're continuing to get interest in this format. I think getting past the skepticism from some of these pharmaceutical organizations to kind of go down this route and kind of break away from the traditional formats is a little challenging, but I think we're slowly winning them over. So I think there's going to be more and more opportunities for us in this ecosystem. As far as I'm aware, we're the only medical education company that's doing accredited education on these social platforms for physicians. I think there are others out there that have done like patient-led initiatives, which I think is great. I think that platform, I think this is really ripe for patient education. But if you can attach that physician education, that medical education to it with credit, with accreditation, I think that's even more powerful, because what we're hearing is more and more patients are bringing this content to their physicians. So why don't we create content for the physician, and if it also reaches the patient, why not go that direction? So I think we could expand upon this for sure. Whether other medical education companies start to go down this route, I'm not sure. I think there's definitely a learning curve. We've had to do this 3 or 4 times now to really find our stride, to kind of understand the ins and out of what goes into the production process and the sourcing and really getting this out there. So I think there's definitely a learning curve, but I think it is something where if I saw other companies doing it, I think there'd be a net positive, especially for the physicians, especially for the providers, because I think again it's really meeting them where they're at. I think adding value and not trying to force them into this model that is restrictive or challenging. I think that methodology, or that concept of meeting these people where they're at and trying to support them in a way that's going to really improve everybody. The care that we get, when we go to the doctor, it's going to improve our care. So why not lean into this? But I think it's really going to depend on buy-in. I think these organizations that are funding, especially the way we operate, we're grant funded, but these organizations that are funding the content that we put together, I think we need buy-in from them in order to really expand upon this.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I I'm a big fan. I know I keep saying that, but the thing is, we work with a ton of
Thank you.
associations, professional societies, and it's just very refreshing to see this type of innovation. And it's not even complex, it's simple, right? That's what allows this to be, I mean, it feels simple, right? I'm sure that
Yes.
there's a lot more
Mhm.
back-end processes to make it feel
Yep.
simple. But what I love about this too is it just leans into natural behavior, right?
Yes.
It's very accessible, and there's a ton of side benefits with your guys' brand as an organization. So
Yeah, for sure. And I think as an organization, the attachment to it is a secondary benefit. I think at the end of the day, it's really about getting the content that's front and center for these physicians to really improve these areas of focus for these physicians where they need the help and diagnosing and treatment. At the end of the day, I think again, what I can really rest on as a marketer to get behind the product that we sell and the services that we offer is we're improving patient care. There's so many people out there that are in need. This only makes it easier and more accessible for folks. So to your point, I think it's natural. I think it's just about evolving the formats and evolving, how to get this content in the hands of people that need it. And I think this is a pretty natural, evolution. I think it's just a matter of the how you get there. And we've started to figure that out. I'm sure others eventually will, but I think it is something that, at the end of the day, this is the trend and the way that things are going. And to get the hands and the content to the people that matter at the right time, these platforms allow us to do that.
yeah, I hope everyone copies you guys, and it's a saturate. But I mean, I think it's going to be better for the industry in general, right?
Yes.
For the CME industry, for any type of continuing education association, it's such a great way to put their brand at the center of the conversation where it matters. So I'm very
Yeah,
excited that you guys are
absolutely.
doing this. And again, it's not easy to be this innovative. I know, the user experience side is easy and great, but to get organizational buy-in to make this type of thing happen, to take a chance on a new format, that just makes
Yeah.
sense, and that people want. So kudos to you guys. I love what you guys are
Thank
doing.
you. Yeah, it's been a real team effort. It's been a real team effort. There's a team here that goes into this and it's really thought through that user experience and really making sure that it's going to be a good one and that they're going to walk away feeling like they actually took something and there's value to it. We're not just trying to capture their attention to sell them something. It's something at the end of the day that they find valuable.
Love it. Now, Ted, I really appreciate the time. What's a good way for people to connect with you?
You can connect with me on LinkedIn, obviously. So LinkedIn, I'm not big on social media otherwise. I mean, I think it sounds kind of crazy, but as a marketing director, it's one of those things where personally, I try to limit my exposure to social media, but it is a tool that we leverage all the time. But LinkedIn would be a great way to connect with me. You can definitely check out MLI Education, mlieducation.org, or you can check out our social followings. We're on Instagram, TikTok, all the major platforms if you want to check out some of the content that we produce for Real CE.
Wonderful. I won't put your personal Instagram in the description. No,
That sounds good.
no, I'm kidding. Ted, thank you so much for the time. I appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thanks, Eric.
Want to learn more about microlearning best practices? We've got you covered. Check out the video cards for more related content. Don't forget to subscribe for weekly tips and explore the description for a curated list of resources to continue your e-learning journey.